Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Rowing Chat. I'm Rebecca Caro, and this is the Anchor podcast in the Rowing Chat network. We're a network of rowing-related shows hosted by lots of different people. So if you fancy being a host, we would love to hear from you. If you fancy being a guest, we would love to hear from you. This particular show is an interview show, so it's usually around the details of somebody's rowing life, the stories they have to tell, and the experiences that they have had. First, let's hear from our sponsors. Blake Gourlay has written a book called The Movement of Rowing, which explains how your movement limitations at your foot and your ankle can affect your performance, also your technique and your health. The book is loaded with self-screening strategies and solutions to help you reach your full potential. So whether you buy it or your coach buys it, you have plenty of opportunity to learn and improve. There are 11 chapters, and they include ones on rowing injuries, rowing mechanics and prerequisites, screening rowers, and rowing solutions. Now you can get 30% off the price of the book using the promo code RowingChat. Follow the link from our website. The sponsors page is rowing.chat/sponsor. If you're interested in a physical copy, it's on Amazon. And Blake is, of course, one of our podcasters here on the Rowing Chat Network. He's got over 12 years of experience in competitive rowing, and he is also a strength and conditioning expert and one of the co-hosts of the Strength Coach Roundtable podcast. Would you fancy doing a race despite lockdown? The smart fellows at Rosenall have set up a GPS speed order on the Charles River, and they're in the process of doing the same for other venues. Greg Benning, Sander Roosendahl, and Gregory Smith have organised a month-long on-the-water challenge over the head of the Charles course. They've called it the Charles River GPS speed order. And you row the course in your single scull with something in the boat just to record your GPS data, and then you submit that to their website, rowsandall.com, and enter the competition. Your time on the course is automatically calculated and posted on the rankings order. The challenge started on the 1st of June, and it runs right through to the end of the month, the 30th of June, 2020. Please, can you help us get the word out? Tell people about it. And if you're in the position to go and race in Boston, Massachusetts, please do. Now, the guys have also said they would love to set up speed orders in other venues. So if you've got a lake or a river and there are a few people locally who would like to do it, please get in touch with them and they will help you set up your own speed order. Now, my guest today is Saul Garcia. Saul, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And Saul is a really interesting athlete. So he's a man who has rowed for both Canada and Mexico as a lightweight and has a unique perspective on the sport of rowing in the Americas. Saul, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you come to this funny sport of ours?
Well, it's actually a pretty funny story. I started back in 1999, 2000. Because my sister actually tried it out in Mexico City, and I was in an IMO as an exchange student or a foreign student in the public school sector there. I just wanted to get involved in as many Canadian things as I could, and among those were rugby and rowing. It turned out I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the friendships. Usually, when you're a junior, you start liking the sport because of that, the friendships that you build over the time that you row. And then when I went back to Mexico for university for a year, the first thing I did was not only play soccer, which was my main thing, but find a rowing club. And it just turned out that I was decent. And because I was decent, I got sort of recruited into this development squad for Mexico's national team, and from there I just made a decision to pursue rowing more seriously and sort of put soccer in the back burner, and yeah, just from there on I rowed for the Mexican national team that usually goes to Canadian Henley that first year back, I had to make lightweight for the first time. Yeah, and then from there, from watching UVic there, and from what I knew about UVic in the past, just rowing as a novice and as an Nanaimo junior, I decided that the best option for me to get really, really good at rowing was not the States or not Mexico, but Canada, and more precisely UVic. I didn't really know any other universities that had a good rowing program in Canada. I just knew that UVic had, like, Silken Lauman had gone to UVic, and Derek Porter had gone to UVic. So I said, well, UVic's the place to be. So after days and days and days of nagging my parents, I finally got mom to say yes, and I got sent to Canada. I got accepted at the University of Victoria, and I got sent to Canada to get a degree. From there, I split my years between Canada and Mexico. I would do the school year in Canada up until finish the spring semester. Do Canadian National Rowing Championships, Brown Cup, all the university sort of circuit. Training with Howard Campbell, who at the time was also splitting his time between the national Canadian team and Canada, and then also and then going back in the summers to row with the Mexican national team. After 3 years, being in Canada, I started in 2003. By 2006, I think I was more confident about my situation, and I just felt I just went and asked Mike Spraklen if I could join his group.
Wow.
I thought, yeah, it's just, and Mike has always had a positive policy of open training environment, because it not only it not only helps the athlete, but it helps him. You never know who's gonna come through those doors, and it keeps the people in the group always, on their toes. So
he did that in the UK when he was coaching women in the UK. He said, anyone can come down to Marlow. Just come and do a session with us. Come and
he opened, like he said, no, doesn't matter your nationality. I wasn't Canadian back then. I was still a Mexican citizen, 100%. And then didn't matter your gender, men, women. We had at least 4 or 5 women train with us in the winters. And it didn't matter if you were a lightweight or a heavyweight. I mean, the lightweights had their own coach, but if you wanted to train as a lightweight and you chose your coach to be Mike, then Mike would accept you. So I did that. I started doing that in 2000, at the end of 2006, all the way until when I finished my degree in 2008, and I went back to Mexico again. So for this, I was going back and forth. Went back to Mexico to try and qualify for the Beijing Olympics. Mexico decided not to send the lightweight double, so I didn't end up going to the Beijing Olympics or even to the qualifier. From there on, I decided that it was time for me to I got Canadian permanent residency, and at the same time that I got Canadian permanent residency is when I moved back to Mexico for like 3 years. 3 years almost continuous. So from 2008, 9, 10, I was in Mexico with a Canadian partner. So that's how I got Canadian residency while I was in Mexico. And those 3 years were my like more active years with the Mexican national team, several World Championships, Pan Am Games, Central American Games, World Cup, those type of things. And then finally in 2012, I decided that I had to do other things besides rowing, while at the same time I've always wanted to get Canadian citizenship and row for Canada. So I moved back. I finally got Canadian citizenship in 2013, after 10 years of being in Canada. And I got selected in 2015 for the Pan Am's team that went to Toronto, the local Pan Am's in Toronto. So Pan Am Games, for whoever's not in the Americas, they're the continental games It goes Commonwealth Games. For Canada, it goes Commonwealth Games, Pan Am Games, Olympics. For Mexico, it goes Central American Games, Pan Am Games, Olympics. So it's kind of like the one step before the Olympic Games. And then retired in 2016 from Canadian national team rowing.
Yeah. So you're uniquely placed to compare two quite different national systems.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us what are the main differences that you've observed between Canada and Mexico?
Well, I always find that people's culture idiosyncrasies, they always reflect on how they business management, sports management. In Mexico, there's this expression when we call, there's the so-called North American business strategy, or North American or a European business strategy, and we always say like, well, we have to tropicalize it. So that's like taking something that's been successful somewhere else, but you kind of adapt it and mold it a little bit to the uniqueness of Mexico or Brazil, Argentina. It is noted that we do have different backgrounds. People grow up differently, so all the differences. There is like Mexican, and it sounds a little stereotypical, but the Mexican system is a little bit. There's less structure to it. There might be, it's smaller. Rowing is not a big sport in Mexico. And if in Canada we have a few thousand rowers, in Mexico we probably have 1,000.
Yeah.
If any. There is also, in Canada, probably the end of rowing, of most people's rowing career ends at university, like at last year of your university career. While in Mexico, most people's rowing career ends up in your last year of juniors, because once university, your parents are like concentrating studying, find a get an internship job, that type of thing. And the other cultural thing is that once we start a university, universities in Mexico are very time demanding. They might not be as efficient in teaching things as like some other universities in the world, but they are very time demanding. And same with jobs. We call it butt time, like just having your butt sit like on a seat. So
yep, I've heard that as well.
So people just they don't really have the time, especially you turn 18, you cannot turn into other things and gotta go to school to do a job. While here, like, it extends like into the university, where it's varsity sport is more of a Canadian and North American and USA type of culture that I would have never experienced if I had stayed in Mexico.
No, I can see that. Yeah. And of course, it's great for Mexico because, they're developing young athletes like yourself overseas. And then you come home and you're already well trained and skillful.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't many of us while I was there. While I was doing the Canada thing, there was a couple of brothers in Michigan. The Rodriguez brothers, also in the national team, but that was it. No one else. And then since then, I think we've had a few girls now being recruited to some minor universities in the US. But realistically, no. I was an anomaly. And another difference is because I had learned training techniques and training, I guess, routines in Canada. Sometimes my training routines and my training approach will be very different to my teammates. And that generated friction. Like, there was friction. Maybe I couldn't tropicalize what I was doing, and I took things too seriously. I was too serious. It was one of those things where you're stuck in the middle. I was too serious for Mexico. I was too fun for Canada. Yeah, and that's been the case since then. So.
I think that's a T-shirt slogan. We definitely need to have that one. So on the Mexican team, you must have known Kenia Lechuga Alanis.
Of course,
woman who was famous to the world and unknown until she won the heat in the Rio Olympics with such incredible style.
Yeah, Kenia. Kenia was there. I went back for a year in 2014. Not even a year. I went back for about 6 months, and I knew her as a junior. Like I've seen her growing up. When I was there, like in 2008, 2012, like a tiny little junior. And then 2014, she joined the main team, and you could tell she was already pretty good. She was beating most of the other girls, and like nothing but good things about her. Like she works hard. She's kind. She's centered. She's a celebrity in Mexico now. So after that, I went to Rio to watch the Olympics, and I remember watching her race, and just like it was insane. And winning the heat also helped her because she had a better path to the semifinal.
Yeah, she did.
She got a
pretty
better
well.
final, and then that allowed her to make the B final, which for her, like, she's a lightweight, she's tiny, like she's 5'4", 100 and what is it, 35 pounds? I don't know. She's tiny. She's a small girl, but lots of heart, and just tries really hard. She's also, I think she got a silver or a bronze medal at U23s 2 years ago. So she's up there, and I have no doubt she'll go to Tokyo. There's no one in, like, she just won Pan Am's. I don't think there's anyone
in the lightweights.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anyone in Latin America that can take her. So yeah,
the way she handled rough water was astonishing. Is the water generally rough in Mexico, or is this just the skill she's developed?
No, so that's super funny. She comes from Monterrey, and once she got selected for the national team, she had to come to Mexico City. So it's a centralized type of system, but Mexico City is always flat. It's a basin. It's a man-made basin. So it's always flat unless you row. Sometimes, like in the winter or spring, it gets really, really windy in the afternoons, but barely no one in the national team rows in the afternoons. Everyone rows twice in the morning. But she comes from Monterrey, and they row at a dam, and that dam is really windy. Like, I know that growing up, she trained in really rough water, and she doesn't, like, as I said, she's fearless. Like, she didn't care. Like, she didn't like, oh yeah, like, I don't know who that lady is. I'm just gonna try and go for.
What a great attitude! I know.
Yeah.
And if you don't try, you never know. And she really went for it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it was really exciting to see her. Both Mexican scholars did really well for Mexico in that.
They did.
Yeah. So it was really nice to see both of them doing so well. Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons I'm fascinated to have you on the show is because you have experienced and observed corruption in the sport. Can you tell us what you've seen and what other people should watch out for?
Yeah. I mean, it's a sad topic, to be honest, and it varies. Going back to the differences in system, I've seen corruption in both systems. It's just very different. The level and what it touches is a little different. In Mexico, I had direct experience, not so much in selection stuff, but my father was the vice president of the federation, and then the president for a few days, until there was a whole mess, like a whole coup kind of thing. Coup.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But this is corruption in the sense of using public funds to finance your personal life. A president that has or the president is a volunteer position, like it is in Canada, and I bet it's in New Zealand too. It's a volunteer, non-paid position. But our president, while I was a rower, the president of the Mexican Federation had quit his job, and his only job was to be the president of the Mexican Rowing Federation. So then you start wondering, well, how do you finance your life? And then just digging into that, the whole thing with my father was because my father is a very, very, very straight arrow, and him and another couple of people in the board started looking into things and found irregularities in receipts, fake receipts, receipts for there's one thing when you travel and you receive money for traveling, you receive your money in pesos, in the national coin, and then it's responsibility of the federation to change those into dollars. When you go to the Mexican, I'll just give you an example of the kind of things like this is at the level that like it's so like low greasy level. So then you go to the airport and you look for in the airport. I don't know if you've ever been to a Mexican airport or a Mexico City airport. There's in the departures area, not in the departure, in the arrivals area, there's a series of money exchange shops. And all of these vary. The farthest you get away from where the most of the people are, the cheapest exchanges, the closest you get to the gates, the more expensive it is. So what they will do, what the system was back then, you will get the only thing you needed to get the exchange rate ticket for $1, and then you could exchange all the rest. You didn't have to show proof of the whole exchange. You could just show the exchange rate for $1. So they will get the more expensive exchange rate, and then they will go to the other one and get cheaper dollars and pocket the difference. Right. So that's just one of the examples that they will do.
And if you've got the money for the entire team that's traveling, that's a very large amount of pesos that you're changing. I can see that.
And this is something they did in front of the athletes. I would see them picking up gas tickets, like gasoline tickets from other people when we were traveling, go through a gas ticket, pick it up, and now it's one of your
take their receipt and
So that's the kind of like corruption that you see there.
And what about in Canada?
The Canadian corruption is more sophisticated, as you would. Canadian corruption, I see corruption in using public funds to in a more sophisticated way to subsidize your life. In a way, I feel that corruption is using public funds to give jobs for over 10 years to the same group of people, who can just pander to them, to their own interests themselves, while having the athletes have to go and do GoFundMe campaigns so that they can pay for their expenses, so they can pay for their breakfast every day. I find that is corruption. After the last Olympics, I kind of digged into the finances of Rowing Canada a little bit. I am a very political person. When I see something that I think it's unjust, I get into it, and I found out that they were spending over $6 million in salaries, just staff, and to me, that for an organization that's funded by public money, and that had the results it had in Rio, and when you have athletes making $1,200, $1,500 a month, trying to make ends meet, and the rest is given by these trust funds like Can Fund, like private money, there's something that's not adding up. There's just it seems like someone's lifestyle is just financed by public money, and that they haven't really found another way of making a living, and it just continues on. Yeah. So that's how I see.
Let's move on to a topic.
Yeah, it's.
Let's move on to a topic that's very topical, which is racism. Now, I don't know how you personally identify, but do you think that there is systemic racism in the sport of rowing that you've observed?
This is actually pretty funny. So when we first talked about, or we started chatting about having this podcast, after our conversation, I said, "Oh, well, one of the topics maybe is systemic racism because I mentioned a couple of things." But after that, I thought, "Oh, maybe that might be a too harsh of a topic or something." And then yesterday, or the whole like over the last 2 weeks, what's happened, right? And then yesterday, I had a conversation with a high up person in Rowing Canada about um, a couple social media posts they had done, and it came up. I said, "Well, how come like Rowing Canada has never? I had never seen a program to include First Nations in rowing in Canada. Like,
Right.
there's not a single program in the whole country that includes First Nations. There's not a single program that enlists people from or tries to reach out to people from inner cities that don't have the $1,500 a month for their kids to row in the local rowing club." Um, and we left it at that time, like it was a friendly conversation. And then whole thing with George Floyd happened, and um, protests starting to happen, and then everyone, corporations and other institutions feel like they have to chime in or they'll be like it's a cool thing to do right now.
I
Like
know. I
everyone
know. It's
doing
so
something.
dumb, but they're all doing it.
So Rowing Canada did it yesterday. They sent an email and they posted on Instagram something about committing to uh, all of this, inclusion of First Nations and inclusion of Black people, and I actually I got angry. I said, well, you had Aboriginal people and Rowing Canada have been around. Rowing Canada, I think, has been around for more than 100 years.
Mhm.
Why now? Like I'm sure, like, great, thanks for thinking about it now, but you received a bunch of money after 2008. What did you do? You could have done something back then, but instead of that, you started a road to podium program,
Yep.
trying to get more tall, big, white kids into rowing. Like, I never saw any of those programs going into the uh, Victoria. Like in Victoria, we have. I honestly don't know, but I think we have over 5 different First Nation groups.
Mhm.
They never went to any of their reservations to do any testing, to do any scouting. All the scouting was still in the middle class, white demographics, right? And there was a lot of money put into that program, like and I never saw any minorities in that program.
Wow.
When I was rowing in Canada for the Canadian national team, there were 2 non-white people in the team, myself and Chinese Canadian,
Hmm.
both lightweight men. Uh,
Right.
no colored women, like zero,
Right.
um, and no colored heavyweight men either. And with the population like Canada's, um, there must be a way that you can include these people. And what bothered me yesterday was that um, only now that it's media savvy to comment on it, that
Yes.
it's a requirement to be in and to be cool, they think about it. And it bothers me that it takes a person in Minnesota, an African American person in Minnesota, to die for Rowing Canada to talk about Indigenous people in Canada. Those Indigenous people have been there for the last, well, since before white people got here. So that it bothered me. I actually I I I didn't I couldn't hold back. I'm usually pretty. I'm not a Twitter warrior. I'm not an Insta one. But yesterday I had to say something. I went off on them, and since then I've had a few, like, I've had quite a few people reach out on direct messaging saying
Mhm.
thank you for saying that, but they still don't do it in public. But it's fine. Like, I'll if I have to be the contrarian and I have to be the guy that's always giving them problems so that they can look at themselves, that's fine with me.
So on this
Mm.
podcast, I interviewed Martin McElroy a couple of weeks ago. He was a national coach for Canada until very recently. And he also mentioned the word homophily, which means hiring people in your own image, so people like you, which brings us to the old boys club, however you define it. Is this still a thing that exists in Canada and Mexico?
It exists more in Canada than in Mexico. In Mexico lately, I've seen a big influx of new people. A lot of guys from my generation are taking leadership positions. Are trying to change things for the better. So I actually and there's openness for that in Mexico. There's ways in which Mexico models itself after the US a little bit, and one of them, there is more openness to competition. Even though it's a traditional society and a traditional culture, there's more openness for ideas and competition, as long as they're going, like, you can show that they're valuable. And this goes back to the differences between system. In Canada, there's what Martin said, he's correct. Like, you don't rock the boat. Like, if you rock the boat, you're a negative person. If you're throwing rocks, you're not well received. You're not gonna be let in, and you get punished for that.
How do they punish you? Like, not selecting you?
No, well, I've never had I didn't have selection issues when I was rowing. I really only tried out for one team, and I know the team that I wanted to. But I've seen coaches I've seen coaches that are a little contrarian. I'm trying to think of his name right now. But as soon as you express an opinion that's not the mainstream rowing Canada opinion, you don't get asked to coach anymore. You don't get asked to coach any national teams. You don't get invited to any events that might have with coaches, or any you don't get invited to apply, type of thing.
So it's more the coaches, you think, than the athletes?
Yeah, and it's more the coaches, and I mean, the athletes, I think they keep the athletes quiet, not with selection stuff, but or if they do, it's more the fear of being deselected. I don't think they actually go and like don't press the button, but I think it's a fear. Like, a lot of these athletes, when you're 23 years old and you think that rowing is the only and the main thing that's ever going to happen for you in your life, you fear not getting selected, and you fear speaking out, because there's always someone willing to, because we're not a pro sport and there's no unions. There's always someone willing, and the whole Olympic movement lives on that. There's someone always willing to take your spot for that Olympic dream. So, okay, John Smith, you don't want to go along with this? Okay, Michael Johnson is going to do it. So, see you later, because the difference between tall, fast guy and tall, fast guy is very minimal. So, like, whoever goes along gets along, right?
Let's talk positively now. How can change be brought about? Are athletes the key to initiating some of these changes?
Yeah, I think athletes and people that are not, like, alumni, people that are no longer involved with rowing, current athletes are the best drivers of change. Athletes need to speak out. Athletes need to question decisions, question funding, question why things are a certain way. And when things are always against what the athletes want, athletes need to take action. So yeah, I think there is a chance for change, but it needs, I guess, it needs a little bit of bravery from athletes, and kind of, and union and that's like in the national team level, and then on the overall, like, rowing in Canada in general, I think alumni have to get more involved. Um, Alumni with resources have to get more involved. Athletes are a little bit constrained, and coaches are constrained. When you're making your living out of from rowing, it's very difficult to at the same time try to initiate change, um, because you might lose your livelihood, right?
Yes,
Um,
I understand.
you might lose your dream. Um, so I think it's up to like people like me, um, people like the guys from the Beijing 8, that type of people to press for change and initiate change and do something to generate change. Um, and I always think the best way, and I know that not everyone can do this, but the best way to generate change is by putting your money where your mouth is. So generating programs, like generating, creating scholarships or creating programs on your own, or creating your own rowing club, any of those like actually tangible material things where you can agglomerate like wheels and money towards a goal that usually has an effect in the long run. So that's also why I've never, or what I'm not, coaching or trying to be within the system. I try to be independent and try to put some of my own personal resources into generating some change. So
That is so admirable, Saul, and thank you for your honesty and for speaking out. As you rightly said, the timing of the interview is fortuitous in some
yeah,
respect, but we were going to talk anyway.
yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for the invitation. It was really nice to talk to you and meet you, and yeah, hopefully something comes out of this, and at least we can all be more honest about our relationship with rowing.
And if people would like to connect with you, where can they find you online?
Sure. They can. I guess they can find me. They can send me a message on Twitter, which is at AvironCSC.
CSE. Yep.
CSC.
C. Okay.
So Charlie Soul Charlie.
Hmm.
And same
And
for Instagram. So both my accounts are Aviron and then Charlie Soul Charlie ESC.
fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saul. It's been an absolute delight. I really appreciate you giving us the time.
Thank
And
you.
to our listeners, please follow us on all the usual social channels. Please tell your friends. Please forward this interview to one person who you think might be interested in taking Saul's ideas forward and growing the RowingChat audience around the world. Thanks everybody for your time. I'm Rebecca Caro, and till next time, bye
Thank you.
bye.